What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Convos with Cam. So excited to have you here. First, I just want to express much gratitude towards those who have just recently subscribed, as well as all of the family that continues to show support. I really appreciate y'all and do hope that you're having a productive week. I hope that all of your families are safe and well. I chose this, pick for today. Just, showing my mommy some love. Love her. She truly is my best friend. Um, but this was a fun time with my mommy. I'll tell anyone, I look up to my mommy and I'm so grateful that I can say that, my mommy's a wonderful um, pillar and role model for me. So. Anyway, I'm sure you'll be in here at some point. Love you, mommy. All right. So today, it's one of those topics, y'all, that we all are aware of, um, but it's one that no one really likes to speak about. We know it exists. We sadly may have actually even experienced it firsthand or know others that have succumbed to such suffering, right? And that's suicidality, right? Or suicidal ideation, whichever way, you prefer to describe it. So, being that it is something that I actually deal with every day in my profession, and I've often spoke about how normalized it is in what I do in my day to day, right? Um, One of the things I just want to focus on is my questioning when it comes to that. Because I noticed that, there's a lot of different pamphlets and resources, and it'll say, hey, if you see this, if you see that, then that may be signs and symptoms of possible suicidal ideation. Now, what that means in the simplest terms, family, is thoughts of suicide. That means an individual has thoughts of suicide. So every time you hear SI or suicidal ideation, that means that the individual has thoughts, right? Now, these thoughts may be without plan or intent. If that is so, that means it's passive, meaning that it's a fleeting thought. It passes through. There is no intent behind it. There is no plan behind it, right? And, people often will present, and I know they do it when they do make these resources available for the public in a way just to increase awareness. I totally understand, right? And I applaud them for attempting to help people become more aware. And I also know that a lot of the people that I've seen and worked with, there weren't those signs or symptoms. So then what happens is, those who may succumb to this suffering that they're experiencing, and it does lead to them following through with their attempt, and this attempt is successful, is what we would call it clinically. Then the family, friends, all those attached to them are like, oh my gosh, what could I have done? Um, if I had said this, if I had really known about this resource and I had checked off this and I would have done that. Family, yes. At sometimes there are moments where, yeah, signs and symptoms will be there, right? And I can say, yes, it'll fit that classic, description of such. But then I also, reflect on what, and who I serve. And sometimes there aren't any symptoms. Now, at times you may have, because I also want y'all to be aware of the spectrum, this spectrum of suicidality. So you may have some that have passive thoughts. And so then they come to the crisis stabilization unit, which, we've always talked about where I work at. It's a step down from the hospital. And it's because they don't want to follow through with an attempt. And so their hope is to be stabilized. Okay. And more times than not, they are, right? Most we never see back there again. It was just, they didn't have any tools within, their window of tolerance to be able to cope. Okay. So that means all they could see and feel was the stressor, and the only answer for them was suicide. Okay. And so then the job at the crisis stabilization unit is to build and provide skills to fill in this gray area. So that way it's not an all or thinking type of distorted thought of this is bad, I have to end my life, right? We're jumping from one end to the one end of the other. So that's one scenario that I've seen. Others may have a diagnosis where there is chronic suicidal ideation, meaning it is always there. And that can be scary for family and friends and those who care about those individuals, right? Especially when a professional will say to the family, friends, guardians, whomever, um, in our professional opinion, it's chronic. They want to live. They, it's always there as this passive thought. The way we have approached it is just to show them show them how to better manage it, if that makes sense. So many times people want to um, have this mindset of get rid of, and that's not always an option, y'all. Okay. Like I said, in some diagnoses, eh, getting rid of is not an option. You know, we as humans, we're not light switches, where it can just be switched off and on. And so that's another observation I've had over these years is that some people it's chronic, but they have no intent or plan, right? So both of these two individuals that I've described to others, someone would be like, oh my gosh, they're high risk. To me, they're little to no risk at all. Okay. Let's fast forward. I don't want this to be too long of a video because I do want all of you to really have a more in depth of what this looks like. And like I said, to have this hard conversation, right? So then we journey more and we say, what about the individual who admits, who maybe had an attempt some time ago within the last year? There may have been some self-harming here recently. Well, the biggest thing we're going to look at is you chose to come to get help. So that means that it's a part of you, remember that parts work, that wants to live, right? And then it's up to us as the clinician to find out and help the individual identify what their protective factors are. What keeps you wanting to go forward, to live? What prevents you from following through again with another attempt, right? Now, for those individuals, depending upon whether or not they have access to means, depending upon whether or not they can identify protective factors, we still may say low risk, but it could go up to moderate risk. Still not high risk. We still would not classify that as high risk. Keyword, if you remember, I said it's still been some time. So for some, they may be like, oh my gosh, they self-harmed. Well, for me, it would be, and they could have chosen to have another suicidal attempt, but they didn't. Okay. Hope this makes sense, y'all. Now let's move further on. Then we have individuals who are really stepping down from the hospital. They actually had an attempt. And they come to us, as a step down just to stabilize before they integrate back into the community and into their day to day. Yeah, as soon as they come in, they're definitely high risk, you know. Um, and yeah, y'all are highly intelligent. I know the people that be in that chat. I know the family. You know why they're high risk. They have recently attempted, right? So therefore, the questioning is really important here. And once rapport, that therapeutic rapport is established, then I will ask straight up, okay, I'm hearing you. You know, you're saying that you're feeling better. You're telling me that the suicidality and suicidal ideation has decreased. Can you tell me what changed? Because everything I read shows me that you still have the same stressors that led up to this crisis, right? And let's take a step further. If you were to leave from the crisis stabilization unit right now, would you harm yourself? Would you follow through? For some of you, you may be like, Cam, oh my gosh, that is just so straightforward. Um, and when you really reflect on this, you can see why, right? Now's not the time to tiptoe around it. You know, it's not the time to be careful and mindful, if you will, of the verbiage that is chosen. No, I need to know straight up. And if you tell me yes, then I'll say, okay, so how would you do it? I mean, I'm really going to ask for all details. And if they answer on the other end and say, blah, 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 this is why I wouldn't, blah, 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 okay, I'm hearing you. And I'm going to ask just as many details because I'm trying to determine if it is a possibility that they are future oriented, meaning that they really are seeing themselves in the future on this side of the dirt, if that makes sense, right? Yeah. So then let's get to the bigger question. Cam, you ask all these questions and you say a lot of words that lean to more of not really being certain. Family, that's because I never am. And none of us who are in this profession ever are. At the end of the day, if someone chooses to do so, that is what they're going to do. Okay. And like I said, more times than not, no, I'm talking thousands of people that have come through those doors and they haven't. And then there's some that have followed through, right? So I only say this to encourage you, even if it's not as heavy as suicidality or SI or things like that that you may be observing in others, okay? I just want to let you know that regardless of the resources and the questioning and all of these things that one may do to support those, at the end of the day, that is their choice. And so if you are dealing with that, if you are, you know, in conversation with loved ones who may be struggling in some way or another, like I said, it doesn't have to be at that end of the spectrum of SI, but just they may be struggling, you know. Only they can choose the next step and follow through and all of those things. All you can do is, if it is safe, and if it's not going to burn you out, be supportive. So even in the midst of trying to take care of others, y'all, you always got to take care of self. And so I just want to encourage y'all to do that, as I always encourage myself. I do my best to constantly be mindful and turning off, if you will, when I need that step away from that, right? So y'all be gentle with yourselves. Give yourselves that same space and grace that you so graciously extend to others. For we are all doing this life for the very first time. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was informative. And as always, I look forward to hearing your feedback. Blessings to all of you. Bye.